How's it going, New World? Sethphir here, and today we are back with another weapon build guide, and this time we will be focusing on damage dealer, melee, strength-based DPS. So it's going to be very specific. We did the tanking guide last time, and we showed you guys what was optimal for PVE, and we are going to do the same here. This is not talking about PvP at all whatsoever. This is PvE, and this is my opinion on the best damage dealing build and utility build for parties, for like dungeons, expeditions, open world, things like that. So keep that in mind and take that with a grain of salt. And we will talk about the Great Axe today, the Warhammer, and the Hatchet, as they are the primary strength-based damage dealing weapons. There are two side notes. Sword and Shield does have a strength-based damage dealing tree, but it is just not up to par with the other weapons, so we're going to go ahead and skip that one. And then there is the spear, which also scales on a secondary stat for strength. We will touch on it briefly because it does have a place in terms of debuffs, but it is not a strength user's primary damage dealing source, so we will have a very small section on that. So let's go ahead and first talk about attributes, because that's going to be important. I know currently the 250 point talent is sort of bugged and slows down your attack speed a little bit. Hopefully that will be fixed very shortly, but for now I put all my points into strength, all 190 that I get to choose, which will put me up to a threshold, and then if I want I can take off a piece of gear like this amulet to push me below that 250 point threshold where my attacks get slowed if I don't have enough, so that would allow me to stay in that sweet spot where I get maximum damage output and maximum special perk bonuses from these, like 10% damage on stunned and slowed enemies, things like that. But eventually, ideally in the end game, you want to work towards 300 strength, as this will give you grit on your light and heavy attacks, which means that you can attack freely without being interrupted by bosses' cleaves and other monsters just hitting you. The biggest DPS loss you can take is by being staggered from getting hit by a mob, so this will allow you to power through a lot of that and just keep spamming damage out. The next threshold that you want to aim for is 200 Constitution, and this will give you a 20% bonus to physical armor, as well as a nice hefty health pool that will allow you to stay in melee combat and not just be deleted by the boss's AoE like collateral damage attacks, right? So you need to kind of be tanky to actually do damage effectively. It's going to give you higher uptime because you're not going to be worried about dying and dodging, and you could just power through the damage and, you know, drink a health potion occasionally. So as you can see here, I have 160 con, and I have upwards of 100 or 260 with my strength. And the reason is that there are two foods in the game which give you 40 to a specific stat. So when I want to put on my serious pants and do big boy damage, I pop a 40 strength food. When I want to put on my, I don't want to die sort of set here, I pop a rabbit, my stewed rabbit vegetable, something like this. It gives 40 constitution. I pop that, which gets me up to the 200 threshold, so I'm super tanky. So I can kind of choose what I want to be. It gives me a lot of flexibility while still maintaining within those milestones. And the reason why I don't have 300 strength and 200 con is because it requires perfect gear, and I don't have that yet. Perfect gear would be all 600 pieces. So if you total up all this armor, which I do have 600 in the armor, it's going to be 125 stat points. From all perfect jewelry at 600, it will be an additional 75 stat points, bringing you to 200. From both of the weapons, it will be 60 total, which will get you to 260. And then if you add in that 40 food, that will get you to 300, along with the 190 points that you get to choose, which will put you to 490, and then you get 5 base stats and 2 point sections, which will give you 10 total, bringing you to that perfect 500 sort of allocation of possible points, and that's your ideal, right? That's what you want to aim towards. So enough about the attributes. Now we have kind of locked that into place. It seems to be common knowledge. So again, 300 strength and 200 con is the go-to, and you use the food to boost yourself up the rest of the way. So now we will dive into the weapons. The first weapon we will dive into will be the bread and butter of damage dealing, which is going to be the Great Axe. The Great Axe has tremendous power. It is very, very good in AoE situations. It is probably the hardest hitting weapon in the game with the hammer when it comes to that, but its utility to pull monsters together is really what makes it shine as well. I do believe the hammer actually does a little bit more damage. However, the Great Axe clumps enemies together and is a very vital part of any group dungeon or just AoE farming or doing anything besides attacking one monster. So let's go ahead and look into the talents here. So the ones we want to focus on is going to be Reap, Maelstrom, and then also Gravity Well. So Gravity Well is a very staple standard ability. It will throw a vortex out and pull everyone in towards the middle, then explode for damage. And there's a talent down here further, which makes it explode for more damage based on how many monsters are trapped inside. And there is a perk on armor and weapons that you can get that makes the Gravity Well explode a second time, and this is what makes it do a lot of damage and provide a lot of utility. So if you can imagine 10 monsters being grouped together, that's 100% bonus damage. It's exploding and then exploding again. You can see where that kind of gets crazy. It also gives you life leech when it explodes on the perk, so this is something that you're going to need to aim for in your armor slots when you get into the end game where you're min-maxing things. The next ability is going to be Maelstrom, and we want to take all the points into here. We do not take this final point in the Gravity Well because it just gives defensive stats, so we're just worried about clearing the dungeon quickly here, or the expedition, or the arena, or whatever that may be. So Maelstrom will pull monsters in together towards you. It also is a double attack on a low cooldown, so it's going to do 110% damage plus another 110% damage. It also consumes projectiles, so like if there's an incoming arrow or fireball or something like that, it's going to just get like negated, and it's just going to break that. So it's kind of nice, but the real treasure on this is that it's going to clump everything together and pull them in. Reap is going to be the other talent that we're talking about, and that is going to be a simple move that's going to reach out, pull monsters in, deal damage, and then swing again for a second time, doing additional damage at 115%, as well as giving life leech. So these are the main core fundamentals of damage dealing, and that's what that is going to break down. Now let's talk about the passives. In the left side tree, in the Reaper tree, we're going to be aiming for light attacks give you more damage, and it stacks up. This is very strong damage boost. We will also take damage or armor penetration against monsters below 50% health. We will also take the 10% critical increased damage down here, Keen Edge, and also another 15% crit against monsters below 30% health, and we're looking to aim towards Bloodlust, which will give us more damage and movement speed when looking at targets, which helps you stick on. So we're going to need a few more points, so we're going to go ahead and add critical gains, as that is a standard. Just whenever you crit, you're going to heal 10% of that damage, which helps you with survivability, which is quite nice, which allows us to get Bloodlust. And then we have 2 points remaining after we take our final talent there. We are definitely going to go over here to the right side tree and get this Center of Attention, which is 10% damage bonus for everybody, as long as there's 3 people around you within 4 meters. So that'll be a solid damage boost there. And then your last attack, or your last talent point, is kind of going to be optional to you. There's really nothing that adds damage here in this tree. The only thing I could say is sometimes you want to do a quick block when there are monsters that kind of do AoE damage, because if you can get that quick block off, you're not going to take any damage, and you're also going to gain damage. So I do like Revenge. You could also choose to get Feed instead of doing the block thing, where you get more HP if you hit somebody that's low. So this is kind of a player preference. If you feel that you're going to be doing some blocking in between the weaving of attacks, which is very strong, you can get an additional 15% damage boost, especially if you position yourself correctly to block a group of monsters hits. You will gain more damage, so it's kind of up to you. Me personally, I like this damage boost with the block, as I have utilized that just learning stuff from tanks and how to fight, and it gives you higher uptime when you block an attack that would normally push you back, or if you power through it with the grit. So it's up to you on the timing to figure out what you want to do there. So these are the talents that I would go for. And now we can go ahead and talk about the other weapons. Warhammer is going to be the exact same as the tank video. The main core talents are going to be Armor Breaker, which comes with a 15% rend down at the third talent, which means that the monster will take 15% more damage. And we'll talk about this rend mechanic as it is a very important tool for melee to utilize, because mostly melee get access to this, and it's kind of your role to soften up the target as a melee damage dealer. The other ability is going to be Mighty Gavel with the final talent of Justice for All, which just hits very hard. And the third ability is going to be Shockwave, which creates an AoE stun, but more importantly, it is going to have a perk along with it, which is going to rend the target's armor by up to 20%. So this is going to be a very important note there. So you do want to get that, and the passives are going to be Outnumbered, which is going to give you damage absorption, 15% damage against CC targets, which is concussive impact, and then this acceleration, which is going to be reducing the hammer cooldowns by 7% when you hit anything with a debuff. When you have like an armor or a rend effect on the target, that counts as a hammer debuff, so you will have 100% uptime on this acceleration icon here. On the left side tree, just to get enough points for Mighty Gavel or Justice for All, we're going to go ahead and get Epitome of Bonk, which just gives you 10% armor pin for all your attacks. You will also get this Empowered Heavy Attack, which increases your attack damage by 20% for 4 seconds. So the ideal here is to start with a heavy attack not fully charged up, and then follow it up with light attacks and skills during that 4-second window. The other option you can have here is to take this move, which will give you grit damage grit damage reduction during a heavy attack, which can be quite strong if monsters are targeting towards you, but it also adds extra grit to your heavy attack. It's kind of redundant with the 300 talent, but there's really not a better option. So you can take a look at Contemplation here, which is going to be increasing your damage on heavy attacks when the target is low, which is part of your normal rotation. You will also take the Quick Recovery, which gives you cooldowns when you do any heavy attack. And finally, Power Through Pain, which is a staple talent here that is going to allow you to deal extra damage when you take some damage. So you're going to constantly be getting cleaved and splash damage onto you while you're fighting monsters. This will just give you a further damage boost as you just kind of push through that and deal more DPS here. The other talents of note is just more damage on the Mighty Gavel when targets are low, and it's going to do more stamina damage, finally ending with the Justice for All, which is a 200% weapon damage hit, in addition to the starter 160% weapon damage hit on the original Mighty Gavel, which does a lot of DPS. The Shockwave side talent here that you're aiming for is going to be Weaken, which is just going to reduce the target's damage dealt. And on that note, Weaken is another powerful buff that is unique to melees to some degree. There are other range classes that have Weaken, but not as much as melee users do have. And there was one perk that we forgot on a side note on the Great Axe, which was when you have a Maelstrom perk, everyone you hit with Maelstrom will be afflicted by Weaken up to 20%. So you're going to reduce the damage that your tank is going to be taking, which allows him to play more aggressive, which increases your overall damage over time. So we'll talk about all those perks at the end too, is just a final brush up. The next weapon that we have here is the Hatchet. So we will go ahead and enter this tree. And the first skill that we're going to get is going to be Berserk all the way down, because Berserk is a great move. It's going to regenerate your HP by a certain percent with some of the talents. It's going to give you attack speed, and it lasts quite a while. It also gives you movement speed, and the most important part is that when you use Berserk, you're actually uninterruptible, so you cannot be pushed back, you cannot be staggered in any way, shape, or form. So this is going to allow you to really stick on a target, and what Hatchet accelerates at is doing damage to a single target. It does a lot of damage really quickly. It does have some abilities which allow you to do AoE damage or more damage based on the amount of monsters near you. which is like this against all odds talent. However, since the Hatchet is a very small weapon, the weapons in this game go off their hitbox, so it is quite hard to hit more than one enemy with the Hatchet unless you're really right up on them. So this is going to be a superior weapon for single target DPS and not an AoE cleave weapon. So keep that in mind. You are going to need to kind of have this like army of weapons with you as a melee user almost to kind of suit the situation and perform optimally. So we'll keep taking a look at the other talents here. So the next one we're going to take is Feral Rush, which is a low cooldown double hit. It is not the greatest DPS, but it allows you to close a gap on a target and continue damage output. So we're going to put 1 point into this, as the other talents don't give too much or don't offer too much. The other ability is going to be Raging Torrent, which does a lot of damage very quickly and is probably going to be your bread and butter skill. This attack also has a perk that lowers your cooldown for all Hatchet skills when you hit it by 5% at max rank, something like that. And since it hits 4 times and an additional 5th time, you're going to get about 25% reduced cooldown on Raging Torrent itself and the other Hatchet skills, which really pushes this skill to be one of the better abilities in the Hatchet tree. The Final Blow talent at the bottom will give you an additional auto attack at the end of it if you press the light attack button sequence. And then we will get into the passives here. We do want Defy Death, as this is an insurance. If you ever get low, you can simply pop your Hatchet and you will not die for 3 seconds, and you will stay at that 50% HP or that 50 HP, and you can then heal yourself up, drink a potion, whatever you need to do, buy time for your team to recover, whatever that situation may be. And then we'll start looking at some of the damage dealing talents in the Berserker tree. So the first one I would take is when the target is below 30% health, you will gain light and heavy attacks, 20% more damage. This is a very solid move. And this is the part where we get into the main combo of the Hatchet. So the main combo is going to be these 2 talents here, Relentless Fury and Accumulated Power. And what they do is when you attack 3 light attacks, your next attack does 30% more damage. And the follow-up for that is when you do a heavy attack, your next 4 attacks or light attacks do 30% more damage. So the idea here is to start off with a Hatchet heavy attack, and then follow it up with 3 Hatchet light attacks and end with a Hatchet heavy attack. And if you do that, your rotation will always have a damage boost. You can then weave attacks like Raging Torrent or even Feral Rush in between that based on what you're getting back. But this is kind of going to be a auto attack weapon. You're just simply going to auto attack, left click the target to death, and activate Raging Torrent whenever possible. But it does do a lot of damage on a single target, so it's going to have high DPS output. Now we have 5 points left, and these other abilities are more utility than anything, or tankiness, and we don't really need these particularly. There are some talents we want in the right side tree, and it's going to be a little weird, so stick with me on this one. The first talent we're going to want is Critical Throw, which is not good in the original description, but down at the bottom, it does increase your critical hit chance of all attacks, not just throws, by 5%. So this is going to give you 5% crit, even on melee attacks. The next thing we're going to want is this Successful Crit Hits and Light Attacks will regenerate 10 stamina, so this is going to be great for dodging and continuing momentum, and it will also get us down 1 tier, and this is where it gets a little weird. Refreshing Throws does nothing for us, and we really need to get to this next damage tier to get 15% increased additional damage if a target has any debuff on them. So we're going to take Infected Throw. And I know what you're thinking. Why do we have 4 skills? This is weird, right? We can only use 3. So Infected Throw is a very niche situational talent, and since this other talent of throwing hatchets is going to reduce your cooldowns, you're never throwing a hatchet. You're just never throwing a hatchet. So we're going to just take Infected Throw because it's going to give us the option to get a Disease Cloud, which is going to weaken the healing on a target. And this is good for the Spriggan Arena, as the Spriggan does heal up during his encounter. There are some bosses that like to heal as well, and you can just swap this over without having to swap a talent or pay anything. You can just simply drag it onto your bar or select it on your bar, and you're good to go. You now have a mortal strike or a healing reduction. And the further talents don't increase it any, it's just going to be for one target. So we're going to go ahead and take this point and keep it as an optional tool in our arsenal that we can select when needed. Then we take the coveted exploitation, which is going to give us 15% damage boost, and then finally a very, very strong talent called Boot and Rally, which means that every time we light attack, we are going to regenerate 10 stamina, as long as it hits a target with an active debuff, which in a group setting will be pretty much always. So gaining every time you dodge, you're just going to attack like 2 or 3 more times, and then you're going to be back at full stamina. So you can infinitely dodge relatively with this talent, which makes it very strong. So this is going to be the build that we're going to go. So we're going to go ahead and commit that there, and then of course remember to take out whatever ability it is that you won't be using at the time. So for me, it would probably look something like this, and then I would keep that infected hatchet throw for a different place when I want to do that. So this is going to be your ideal for the hatchet, and then we will briefly talk about spear, as it is more of a dexterity weapon. It scales way higher off of dexterity than it does strength, but the problem is that a lot of times in groups, people will have a hammer, but they will not have a spear. And your goal is to get 50% armor rend on a monster. That is the maximum amount that you can have. The hammer will give you 35% between the armor breaker move and the shockwave perk. The perk being 20% and the armor breaker move being 15%. So that's a 35% total. So you need to figure out how to get additional 15% rend. And that's probably going to come from either the spear. There is one talent in Hatchet that gives you 10%, but 15% if you hit it from an 8-meter distance. So you could consider that move over the infected throw, but it's kind of up to you. It's very niche and situational in my opinion, but it's much easier to go into the spear tree and simply grab this move Perforate, which is going to give you the 15% that you need or are missing at on a 3-hit combo. It's 5% per hit, and it's going to be the full 15% that you're missing. The other talent that we'll talk about is going to be this Rupturing Strikes, which increases that rend to 10% against targets above 50% HP, and that will be something that will get that rend going faster. But again, this is not an ideal damage build for the spear, for like strength. The best build that you're going to get is going to be this, which we're going to select literally pretty much all of these passives on the right side are going to do something for you. In addition, with this Rupturing Strike, so we're going to take all of these passives except for this crippling jabs, because it's not going to really add any damage output to us. We will be taking the Skewer ability, which puts a bleed on a target. There is one that lets it do more damage at full health, but that's not super important. This one it's going to give you Empower when you critically hit with the Spear Bleed, which is going to increase your damage by 20% for 10 seconds. And then a final one, Deep Wound, increasing the bleed by 15 seconds. So you can sort of swap to the Spear, throw out your abilities, and then switch back to your main DPS weapon, just so that you maintain that armor debuff on. The other talent here is going to be Vault Kick, as we cover it real quickly. We will take all the talents for that, because there is a perk for Vault Kick that will increase all your critical hit chance by like 20% when you get it on a weapon or armor piece. And there is a perk for Skewer, which will lower or put Weaken on the target, which will also lower the amount of damage they are dealing. So these are the nice abilities that you can pick up. And as you can see, we have one final talent point, and really I would probably put it in this last point for Perforate, which would mean that when you hit all 3 of those, you will stagger the target, so you'll stun them a little bit. It helps a bit. So this is what that's going to look like. It is not the most ideal damage dealing build. If I go here to put on a spear, and then I take a look at my stat allocation, you can see that my Great Axe has doing 1,262 damage, while my spear is doing 869. And that is because the spear scales with strength as a secondary and it scales with dexterity as a primary. So it's much better if you have a bow user with a spear to provide this armor rend, but sometimes you need to get the job done as a melee user, and you need to bring that extra armor rend, assuming your tank is using the hammer armor rend. So keep that in mind, because a 15% damage boost for everybody is going to be a lot better than your personal second weapon doing more damage. So plan your group composition accordingly. And then the last thing that we will kind of comment on will just be the armor layout. So for a DPS user, you don't actually want to aim for heavy. You want to aim for a little bit under heavy. So if I could put on a few pieces that were not, I can show you where that ideal would be, and it would be somewhere right there. This exact combination is not ideal, so what you would really want would be up to medium weight, so you get the 10% damage bonus, and you get the maximum armor value, because you are going to be taking hits as a melee user, and you do not want to get deleted in one hit, right? So keep that in mind. You're going to need to find armor, and it can be a combination of Void Bent. It's probably going to be more along the lines of 600 gear score armor that's suited for you, like specific talents here. Like this one says Javelin applies rend and it gives strength and dex. It's probably going to be a mix mash of pieces like this. Like you're going to want one glove piece with the Gravity Well double hit talent. You're going to want one with the Maelstrom damage reduction talent, where it makes monsters do less damage, and then you're going to want some in the other categories depending on what weapon you're using. So you're going to have a few different sets of armor to sort of kick that off. And with everything else in the game, ideally you want to be aiming for weapons like this for damage dealers, which are going to give a large amount of pure strength, and then critical hit chance and critical hit damage. The next best in slot ability for the orange weapons is going to be a perk called Keenly Empowered, which is going to increase your damage by 15% when you critical. So that's going to be the best build you can get for a weapon. And then there are going to be pieces of armor like this ring, jewelry like this ring, which will also give you critical hit chance. So you want to stack up critical hit chance as much as you can, stack up critical hit damage on a secondary, and then you want to aim for things like the Keenly Empowered on the weapons themselves, or special abilities like this, Keenly Jagged. On crit, you cause the bleed for 7% weapon damage per second for 10 seconds, as that damage can add up over time. So it's going to be hard to find the perfect weapon for you, right? It's not always going to be the case that you find the exact perfect weapon, but if you can, and if you can locate these items or craft these items, then you can build a very nasty melee DPS damage build. Alright, that pretty much covers everything. Thank you for your time, everyone. I appreciate you sticking through and watching this video. If you have not already, be sure to check out the subscribe, like, and bell button down below for more content like this in the future. We also have a join button, which has the membership bonuses and perks. We have emojis, badges, and special polls for members, so make sure to check that one out. We also have a Discord down below in the description, which you can click to join and ask me questions or reach out to community members who discuss things like this all the time, as well as other various aspects of New World. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you in the next video, everyone.